Hi, this is Savannah,
And this is Brian from the Dorky Diva Show,
and you're listening to Starboars.
the best place for below average Star Wars.
Welcome to Starboars, the best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, the best place for below average Star Wars. I'm the Geordie Jedi Pete, and we're back with another Purely BELTA special. This will be our fourth Purely BELTA episode. What is Purely BELTA, you say? Well, it's something that you find excellent or brilliant, and the phrase is a Newcastle or a northeastern saying, which is where I'm from, to mean that. For example, if I want to order an awesome takeaway, and I'm in North Tyneside, I'll probably ring up Massimo's Pizza and get a DJ special, because the DJ special pizza is Purely BELTA, and that's how the phrase works. Today is a very special day. We've got Kat from Jedi News here to tell us all about why Ben Solo / Kylo Ren is Purely BELTA. Kat, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, thank you.
Do you see, I said Ben Solo / Kylo Ren, do you see them as sort of different characters or very much the same character?
I think I see them as these two separate sides of the same character. I don't treat them differently. I think Ben is obviously the light side, and then Kylo is the dark side. And I think it's almost a good representation of how we all have the different sides that we show the world.
Yeah, very much that sort of yin and yang, two sides of the same coin. Sort of Anakin Vader, very much like his grandfather. Definitely. So, how do you say Purely BELTA? Because every episode we've had mainly guests from America do it so far, guests from Florida, and Seattle, and they've made fun of the accent a little bit. Can you say Purely BELTA?
I think I can. Purely BELTA. Which probably
awesome.
sounds.
And can you do it in my accent?
Probably sounds a little bit strange with my English/Welsh accent.
Can you try it in the Geordie accent?
Oh my gosh, you're asking for a challenge now. Let me see. I need to channel my inner self. Purely BELTA.
That's good. It's better than some of the ones we've had, so I'll give you that.
Yeah, I can't really do that sort of up north accent, to the absolute horror of my Jedi News teammates, because they are from up north.
Well, hopefully they don't judge that too much when they next speak to you. So, Kat, obviously you find Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, to be Purely BELTA. Tell us about when you first started to become a fan of Ben Solo and Kylo Ren. Was it in the run-up to The Force Awakens, or was it very much sort of after seeing the movie?
Well, the funny thing is, actually, I only got into Star Wars just before the release of The Force Awakens, in the sort of run-up to it in 2015. And when I watched The Force Awakens in the cinema, that was my first Star Wars film in the cinema. I completely remember going down to my local cinema at, I think it was 6 a.m. in the morning, completely dark, completely cold. I had no idea what to expect. And I go into this screen and I am just completely blown away by it all. And I remember coming out of the cinema and saying to my mum, Kylo Ren is now my favourite Star Wars character.
That's fantastic. So was it sort of the trailer that got you sort of hooked going to go and watch the movie, or sort of what was it that sort of
Well,
got
I'd
you
seen
wanting
the
to go and see
original
The Force Awakens in the
trilogy.
cinema?
And really liked those films. And then I discovered, I think by accident online, that Disney had bought Lucasfilm. There was these new films coming out, what would become the sequel trilogy, and I immediately wanted to go see it. So the trailer definitely got me interested because obviously Kylo was being portrayed as the bad guy of the film. But then when I actually saw The Force Awakens, I think I liked Ben because to me he wasn't particularly a villain. Kylo was very morally grey.
Yeah, I think I often look at Kylo as lost. He's a person who doesn't really, because his legacy is perhaps too big for any one person to sort of live up to. I think that that weighs down on him, and sort of where does he see himself in the galaxy? And I don't think he really knows that. So I often see him as sort of lost, and sort of after feeling sort of unloved by his family, maybe unwanted by his family, maybe he feels that way. And obviously Snoke being there, sort of whispering the right things in his ears and grooming him, and then he goes to Snoke and starts doing bad things, and that makes Snoke happy. So it's like pleasing his new family. I don't think he actually does things because they're evil. I think he does things because it's pleasing this person who is sort of being a family to him, if that makes sense.
It does. Completely agree. I think Ben and Kylo are the perfect example of a character who is just at a crossroads, who's become lost in trying to find himself. And you're totally right in what you said. I think Ben feels very isolated from his family. It's spoken about in Bloodline by Claudia Gray and in Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older that Han wasn't around much. He was busy racing. Leia obviously is a massive figure on the Senate. And then he's just sent off to Luke at quite a young age. So I think he doesn't have those familial bonds. And then he's got all these expectations. He's a Solo, he's a Skywalker, he's named after Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think all that pressure, you're right, it will get to a person. This is too much for one person to bear without guidance. And then Ben just falls under the wrong guidance of Snoke.
Definitely. I'm glad you brought up Bloodlines by Claudia Gray. Obviously, once the secret comes out to the galaxy that Leia's very much the daughter of Darth Vader, the book hints at the fact that that they haven't told Ben that, so Ben does not know, and Ben's now going to find out through the news, through the HoloNet, and it doesn't really talk about how much of an impact that has on Ben, but I can imagine that being quite a big deal. It's like you sort of sent me off to be with Luke. You haven't really been with us much, and then there's this big secret comes out where Darth Vader's my grandfather, and like you never told me that. Sometimes I think of that as, I remember when I first read it in the book, I was thinking this might have been like one of the tipping points that tipped Ben over to sort of speaking to Snoke even more.
It's life-changing, that kind of news, and to hear it on the HoloNet. I mean, what must have Ben thought? He's sitting there watching it, thinking his mum and dad have hidden this from him. Luke has hidden this from him. Everybody's basically lied to him. And to be related to that great sort of evil, I mean, Vader did terrible things. To know that must be heartbreaking. And then, of course, there's the fallout, not just for Leia, but for Ben himself, because everybody knows that he's Leia's son. So obviously he's going to get all of that put onto him as well. And we know it's hinted at that Ben already sort of had a bit of a temper, and people talk about sort of the shadow within him, and then he's going to think that it's justified because he's related to Vader. So it's a terrible thing to find out in a terrible way, and I think yes, it must have been one of the factors that did drive him to the dark side.
I sometimes think that, I understand why they didn't tell him, because obviously it was a secret that they didn't tell anybody. The only people who knew, I believe, were Han knew, Leia knew, Luke knew. I understand why they didn't tell him, but sometimes I think that if they had told him, been open about it, and said, "Look, your grandfather was Anakin Skywalker, hero of the Jedi, hero of the Clone Wars. He turned to the dark side and did some terrible things. He did those things confused and trying to save someone he loved, but went the wrong way about it. But then when he had one last decision to make, he made a good choice and saved his son, saved Luke." I think if they taught it to Ben that way, I think maybe all this could have been avoided. I think like Ben would have understood, oh, like, okay, the dark side is bad and you can't do those bad things, but my grandfather, he took that path and then ultimately regretted it and then turned back to the good side. You would know that. So then when the choice came for Ben, it would be like, I'm going to learn from the past because I've been taught it. I know what happened to my grandfather and I know about his regret and his tortured life as Darth Vader, and I know about when the chips were down, he made the choice to save Luke and destroy the Emperor. I think if they taught it to him that way, maybe Ben doesn't go off the deep end and become Kylo Ren.
I think in Bloodline it's also said that I think Chewie and Lando either knew or highly suspected. But yes, totally. I think one of the great tragedies of Ben's character is the fact that if Leia, if Han, if Luke, if they'd only done things differently, maybe he wouldn't have fallen to the dark side. From all the literature and what we know of Ben, which isn't actually a ton, but there is quite a bit, it's always suggested that Ben doesn't know these things, his family are hiding things from him, and if only they'd just done things differently, been more transparent, been there and more supportive, he just wouldn't have fallen to the dark side.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think one of the things maybe Luke didn't learn from was, the way the Jedi see the dark side, especially towards the end of Clone Wars, in sort of that prequel era, the way the Jedi view the dark side, it's ultimately the downfall where Luke shows you that you can sort of tap into that dark side energy. We see it in that battle with Vader, but you can always make a better choice and pull back from it. But it looks like they choose not to teach that to Ben, and the rest is history, as they say. We obviously Ben obviously turns the dark side, becomes Kylo Ren. I always saw the name Kylo Ren as him acting out against his family. He takes Kylo. It's very much Skywalker and Solo put together. Obviously, Ren is from the Knights of Ren, who he becomes the leader of, who he joins up with. But he chooses his first name based on his family legacy. And I think it's very much him trying to say, you know what, you Solos and you Skywalkers are known as being heroes, and you've not done well by me, so I'm now going to go and do bad things under both your names, and sort of trying to portray them in a bad light. And I think it's sort of like almost as a teenager acting out, sort of against his family.
That amalgamation of the two names, as you say, Solo and Skywalker, and he creates Kylo. Yes, he's definitely forging a new identity for himself, something that he owns. It's not a name that's a legacy of a past Jedi. It's not a name that's connected to either side of his family. It's just him. And I think that's what Ben is trying to be. He is just trying to be himself. And like any teenager, he makes mistakes. He gets it wrong. You see it a lot in The Rise of Kylo Ren by Charles Soule and Will Slimey, of Snoke whispering to Kylo, manipulating Ben into going to the Knights of Ren to form this new identity. And the choices Ben starts to make are the wrong choices for the galaxy, but he thinks they're the right choices for him because he's finally breaking away from the rules of the Jedi, the constraints of the Republic, and just trying to be himself. But in trying to find himself, unfortunately, he just loses himself.
Definitely. I think also when talking about the name, I think again in that the Rise of Kylo Ren comic by Charles Soule, I think there's a panel where he addresses sort of being named after Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obviously Ben being Obi-Wan Kenobi's secret alias once the Republic falls. And he references sort of being named after a great Jedi. And I think he also references maybe the fact that he's not so great. He sees himself as not so great, if that's right.
Yes, I think that happens in issue 1 of that series, and he does state that he hates his name basically, and the fact that with the name Ben comes all this expectation that he should be a great Jedi and he should be doing all of these things. And he also states to Snoke that the Solo is a lie. So clearly Han must have told him that the surname Solo was invented. And I think Ben is looking for all these reasons to be angry at his family.
Yeah, and he very much finds reasons there as well, so just to fuel the fire. Obviously, we see Ben, he turns to the dark side. He takes the name Kylo Ren. We see him change his lightsaber. He takes the same hilt and he modifies it into a cross guard, as seen by the Jedi and Sith of old. And we also see sort of his blade is very much distorted. It's almost crackling, unstable. I remember when we first got the visual dictionary for The Force Awakens, and it's just one line from the crystal saying cracked kyber crystal, and that got my mind racing so much back then in 2015 as to sort of why was it cracked? Had there been an accident? Had it cracked when Ben was bleeding his lightsaber? So obviously, listeners, if you're not sure, obviously you can't find red kyber crystals. The way the Sith or the dark side get red sabers is that they take a kyber crystal, whatever color it may be, and they pour their sort of their malice, their hurt, their pain, their anger, their evil thoughts, their sorrow all into this kyber crystal, and the kyber crystal ends up bleeding red. So obviously Ben had his lightsaber, his blue one, which we see in the Last Jedi flashback scenes. And as we see by the hilt, it's the same hilt as the one, or the same design as the one he has as Kylo Ren, but it has the exhaust port of the cross guard saber, and the blade's distorted because the kyber's cracked. Sort of, what's your theory on why the kyber crystal's cracked?
I think when Ben is bleeding it, again, this is something we see in The Rise of Kylo Ren, I think it probably cracks because he's not certain of his choice, I think, even at that point. And the instability of that crystal and his saber basically reflects, I think, the turmoil within him and the fact that he's not stable within the dark side and he's not stable within the light side. He is somewhere in that between. So I think it does represent part of the instability of his character's place. And the energy is then dispelled between the two quillons on the side of the hilt. What's also interesting about the hilt design is the fact it's actually very, very similar to Leia's when we see it in the Rise of Skywalker. So he's actually carrying a piece of his mother with him, even though he's turned his back on his family. And again, I think that links in with the crackness of the crystal, is the fact that Ben can't fully turn back on his family. He always feels that conflict.
Definitely. I think another, obviously, the lightsaber and the cracked kyber crystal tells that story of him being sort of drawn between the light and dark and not fully committing to either. I think also another use within the movies is his mask. It's often sort of, he takes it off, he puts it back on throughout the, you know, throughout the series. In that first movie, he takes it off, he puts it back on a few different times. The second movie, he smashes it. And then by the third movie, he remakes it and again has it on and off again throughout that movie. I think again showing that like most times when he puts it on and he's sort of hiding away from his good intentions in the light side, and he's like, I'm going to be this bad man, I'm going to be this killer, I'm going to be this dark lord. And then obviously that gets too much at times, in my opinion. He takes it off, and he constantly chops and changes because again he's lost and he's got two paths in front of him and he's sort of trying to go down the middle, sort of jumping between both of them. What's your view sort of on the mask and also the fact that he reforges it in The Rise of Skywalker?
That mask is really interesting. It's an iconic piece of design. But yes, he definitely uses it to hide behind. Whenever he's typically wearing the mask, he is being a Knight of Ren. He's out enforcing the will of the First Order. Whereas then when he takes it off, he first takes it off for Rey, he's showing her who he really is, the side underneath his mask. And Snoke tells him rather maliciously that he's just a child hiding behind a mask. And I think there is some truth in that, in the fact that he does use it to hide behind. Because I think he doesn't want to face what he's doing. And then obviously in anger, he destroys the mask because he wants to be stronger than that. And he wants to be stronger than what Snoke thinks he is. As for the reforging, that's touched upon in the novelization of The Rise of Skywalker, both versions, the junior novelization and the adult by Ray Carson. And I think he does it because in a lot of the literature, Ben or Kylo, when he's thinking in his head, he states how he never saw himself as supreme leader. It's not a role he wanted. So I think he reforges that mask to hide behind when he is supreme leader. But those cracks, those red cracks, were very significant because I think they show how Kylo's facade is falling. He's cracking to return back to Ben Solo.
Yeah, I think, he could have very much had a new mask made, but he decides to take the old one and reforge it. And obviously those red cracks, the red welds that are there, very much like the Japanese art of kitsugi, which is where they sort of repair broken bowls, broken cutlery, broken ornaments with gold, and it's to sort of highlight the cracks in the past of the object and the object's owner. Very much to say, like this mask, it was whole, and I used it. I wore it to do bad things. I've now reforged it, but I'm not going to hide the fact I smashed it once. And to me, the mask, the fact that it's sort of got those red cracks, it's been welded together with the red masks, is sort of a very subtle way of saying, remember that I once smashed this. Remember that I once killed Snoke. Remember that I once fought the dark side. And it's sort of, to me, it's hinting at the fact that he's going to do that again later on. So it's sort of a very subtle look at what could happen later on, which obviously we do see him sort of, take up the blue lightsaber and fight alongside Rey against Palpatine. Obviously, you mentioned about how Ben sort of struggles to, like fully go dark side. I think in the key moments where Ben is left with his most important decisions to make, let's talk about the first one in the Force Awakens, the bridge scene. Obviously, he walks out onto the bridge. To me, I think he knows Han's there. He knows he's there. He can sense him. He knows the Falcon's there. I think he knows by walking out there, he knows that his dad's probably going to present himself. What were sort of your thoughts watching that scene? Your thoughts on that scene now, and sort of the pause that Ben has as he talks to his dad. He takes the mask off to speak to his dad, and they have a conversation, and then it's sort of, the bad act doesn't happen until sort of the sun or the star that Starkiller Base is drawing its energy from fades, and as that fades, Ben makes his decision. Do you feel that Ben sort of already knew he was going to do that to Han, or do you think it was very much while he's speaking to him, he's still making his mind up?
Oh my gosh, that scene was so shocking and so heartbreaking in the cinema. I remember everybody gasping because I don't think any of us were expecting it. Han Solo, a legacy Star Wars character, and Ben unfortunately murders his own father. You're right, the cinematography of that scene where he's so conflicted whilst the draining light from the sun is still on him, and then when it goes dark and there's just this red ambience, he murders Han. I don't think Ben walked onto that bridge intending to kill Han, but he knew what Snoke would do to him if he didn't. And in that conversation, Han says, "My son is alive," and Ben doesn't really know how to react to that. His family want him home. I think perhaps in that moment, Ben thought that he couldn't be redeemed. He'd gone too far. So the only way to keep going was to keep going deeper, to keep getting badder, and just to keep Snoke happy.
Yeah, I think when I was watching that scene, I think, Han says, I think Kylo tells him that his son is dead. Ben Solo was weak, so I destroyed him. It dials right into sort of how Vader felt about Anakin, sort of after the fact. And I think here we go, it's sort of justifying his turn. I turned because I'm stronger now because I was weak before, and it's sort of justifying it to yourself as well as to others. I think on that bridge when Han says, "Come home," I think he does think about it. He thinks about, how can I go home? Can I go home? Or have I gone too far? And again, I think you're spot on when you've said, he's thinking about Snoke. What's Snoke going to do if I don't do what he said? And also, what's Snoke going to give me? Snoke said, this is my test. And if I do it, does that mean all this pain's going to go away? If I do it? Even though really we all know it's going to cause more pain because you're killing your own father. But I think he's that far down the rabbit hole, and he's been told that many things by Snoke. There's that many thoughts in his head going around. Again, he's lost. That it's like, I could go home right now. He said, "Your dad said I can go home. I can go home." But have I gone too far already? And also, Snoke said, if I do this, that's sort of my one big test done. And then does it all go away if that happens? And if that's the case, then I'll take it. I don't need to remember this anymore. Obviously, there's the pause, and then obviously he hands the saber out, but he ends up killing Han, killing his father. If we take that scene, in the decision he makes to do that, he doesn't take it lightly. And I honestly think, in my opinion, that he does think about going home with Han, and he's trying to wait it all up in that moment. And I think you can see it in his face. And I think as the light of the star goes out in his brain, he decides, I'm going to kill him. And does it. And obviously, as Snoke says, in the Last Jedi, it broke him. Probably the moment he did it, he's very much like, very upset about it. We get a very similar scene and decision in The Last Jedi when Kylo is flying against the Resistance fleet, and he ends up he's got a clear shot on the bridge, and the camera sort of, we get a shot of Leia, a shot of Ben. They can obviously sense each other, and Ben sort of his thumb hovers over the missile. We've seen in the scenes before that just how trigger happy he is. He's very, very good pilot like his dad. He manages to sort of destroy the fighters in the hangar really easily. He's got a good strategy, and here he is. He's aiming his missiles at the bridge, and he obviously connects with his mom, and he hesitates. We see it with his thumb, and we see it in his face. He's almost gasping for breath, almost in that scene. Do you want to talk about that scene and like your thoughts on Ben's decision or Kylo's decision there? So again, in my opinion, he hesitates. He takes his time, like he did with his dad. Then he ultimately decides not to pull the trigger, and then somebody makes the decision for him.
Totally. That's that scene where Kylo is connecting with Leia. You can almost imagine that through the Force, albeit they're not speaking to one another, they can sense one another. And even after everything Ben has done, Leia still loves him. There is nothing stronger than a mother's love. And I think Ben must be able to sense that, even though he's doing terrible things there and then. He's destroying his mother's fleet, what she stands for. But she still loves him. In that moment, Ben is clearly conflicted. You can see it in every line of his body, his face. That's quite a representation of his scar as well, which he has at that point. That ray inflicted with her lightsaber. That physical scarring, I think, is a representation of not just the scar he bears on his heart, but also his conflict. And he can't do it. Unlike Khan, he can't kill his mother. I think possibly it's because of this forced connection between the two of them, which was something he doesn't have with Han. And he, in that moment, decides, no, I can't do this. And it's very moving, that scene, because he is taking a side there, and he's taking his mother's side, which does hint that Ben is quite close to his mother, or was at one point.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought the scar up. I think the scar, obviously, the strike that Rey inflicts on Ben's face is sort of right where Han touches his face before he falls off the bridge. So that's a constant reminder of like what he did to his dad. I think obviously, it's funny. He meets Han and kills Han on an actual bridge, and then here, it's the bridge of a ship. So again, very subtle sort of nuances there by the storytellers. And I imagine very much on purpose, considering Rian Johnson's storytelling ability. I always thought that when he was sort of hovering over the trigger and he senses Leia, I think he was once they connected, I think Ben was expecting to feel sort of anger and pain from Leia in regards to the fact that Ben killed Han. But I think when they connect, I think he just feels Leia's love for him. And I think that's what puts him off. I think he's thinking, I've killed your husband, I've killed my dad. When we connect here, I'm going to feel all your anger towards me, and then I'm going to pull the trigger, no problem. But when they connect, I think Leia is very much like, I love you. Doesn't matter what you've done, like, I love you so much. And I think that's what puts him off. And then, probably luckily for him, because it means he doesn't get in trouble from a Snoke. Obviously, his two wingmates, one of them pulls the trigger and fires at the bridge anyway, so it means Snoke doesn't find out about this, which is probably a good thing, and sets it up later for Ben to make a decision in the throne room.
It's touched upon in the novelization of The Last Jedi that Ben can feel his mother's anxiety in that moment. Obviously, the resistance is being attacked, but he can feel her worry, not worry for herself, but worry for him. He can sense her love, and even through the Force, he can sense that Leia just wants him home. And Ben then is surprised when his wingmate does fire that torpedo. And it's that surprise, because he was so focused on his mother, that means he doesn't stop the torpedo. I think if he hadn't been surprised, I suspect he would have used the Force to send it off course.
Yeah. No, definitely. Obviously, we've talked a lot about sort of, in that scene in particular, and on the bridge scene, just the drama and the gravitas and the emotion. Obviously, Adam Driver brings all of that to the performance. What's your thoughts on sort of Adam Driver's performance as Ben Solo, Kylo Ren?
It's an incredible performance. I think it's probably up there with some of the best acting in Star Wars, because he embraces Kylo's two sides and that conflict, and you can see it every time he's on screen. And one thing that Adam Driver always fought for was to always come across with Kylo's humanity. There is a man behind that mask. There is a human, a tortured human in that soul, and you can see that in the way he portrays it. I don't think that Kylo would have been such a relatable character if he'd been played by anybody else.
Definitely. I think for me, in the promotional material leading up to The Force Awakens, it was very much like, this is the villain. But I think obviously the character we got on screen wasn't a villain, and I think Adam Driver really does make you care about Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, care about his past and also care about his future and where he's going, and also makes you sort of wish he made different decisions. Like when he's there on that bridge with Han, you're hoping that he makes a different one to what he makes, and he sort of, with his acting ability, takes you down a thing of this thought. We see the character thinking about it. Definitely Adam Driver, sort of, I would say he's probably the best actor of his generation right now. Who's came about in the last 10 years. I think he's one of the best male actors in this current decade. I think he's only going to get stronger and stronger as it goes on. So I'm really glad we got to get him in a Star Wars, as this powerful two-out of Force character.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Obviously, another decision Ben makes is in the throne room during The Last Jedi. Obviously, so he's made the decision to kill his dad. He's made the decision to not pull the trigger on his mom. And then here Snoke presents Rey right in front of him and tells Ben or Kylo to kill, to essentially, what's the word? Not assassinate, but it's almost like a, when you, like in the olden days when you would execute, yeah. So essentially puts Rey in front of Ben for Ben to execute Rey, an unarmed Rey, to be executed. And he has a choice to make. He can either execute Rey, or you can do something else about it. And obviously he ends up doing something else about it. And he also knows that Snoke's in his head, and so uses that to his advantage to trick Snoke. What's your thoughts on this scene and sort of the choice Ben makes?
Tricking Snoke is the key to this scene. Kylo is clearly projecting something completely different in his mind to Snoke than he is actually doing. Rey to Kylo is the person who understands him. I think that Rey is the first person to understand Ben's conflict and to understand Ben's pain. And Rey offers him compassion. And I think she's probably one of the first people to do that. And compassion is such a strong emotion to offer somebody. I mean, she was close to Han, they formed a friendship, and yet, she's still compassionate towards Ben. She still believes that light is within him. And I think Ben is locking onto somebody who still sees the light within him, who sees him as more than his actions. So in that moment when Snoke orders her execution, he knows that he's not going to do it. He's not going to snuff out the only person in the galaxy that he's currently got a connection to. So he makes a decision, well, if I get rid of Snoke, then I can keep Rey.
Yeah, and obviously, Rey doesn't always necessarily say it that way at the end, but so he doesn't make the decision to sort of, you're right, he makes the decision to sort of kill Snoke, keep Rey, and then essentially just go on in life. But obviously, that's not really an option at all, which Rey lets him know about, like, after they've took care of Snoke and the guards. I'm sure there's a bit in the novelization of The Force Awakens after Rey cuts Ben down and she's sort of standing over him. I don't know if it's hinted that the Force is sort of telling that to kill Ben, or maybe the dark side of the Force is in our head saying, kill him. And then, like, luckily before she makes a decision, the ground cracks anyway, which you could say maybe is the good side of the Force splitting them apart before a decision can be made in error.
Yes, I know which part you're talking about. It's right near the end of that novelization. I do wonder if that was actually Snoke speaking in Rey's head. Considering we know that Snoke is a puppet of Palpatine, Rey is a Palpatine, was that him trying to get a new apprentice by cutting down Ben?
Yeah, I mean, Ben's been defeated here, so he's damaged goods. Very much the same as Vader's damaged goods once Luke defeats him, and then Palpatine tries to get Luke to take his place. Once Luke says no, here Rey's defeated Ben. So is Snoke in Rey's head to say, kill him, and then I'll work on you and make you my new apprentice, and then maybe the good side of maybe the Force reacts to say, you know what, Snoke, you're not going to win, because even if you just decide to do that, I'm going to split the planet in half. I mean, the planet's breaking anyway, but maybe the fact that like that bit cracks apart and they become like separate takes that decision away from us. Maybe that's sort of the Force acting in weird and wonderful ways, perhaps.
It could well be the Force trying to protect this dyad, even though they don't know it at that particular moment.
What's your thoughts on the dyad and sort of, and what do you think it brings to sort of this sequel trilogy?
I love the sense of this dyad. I've always seen Kylo and Rey as basically sort of an enemies to lovers story. It's quite much a romance of the fact that Rey is compassionate towards Ben even after everything he's done, and Ben forms this connection with Rey because she still sees the light in him. I think it's definitely in the novelization. I don't know if it was cut from the film, but right at the end of The Force Awakens, you see in Adam Driver's portrayal of Kylo, it's this realization, this recognition when Rey summons Luke's lightsaber to her. And I do wonder if at that point he was sensing this dyad, because in the novelization he definitely says, "So it is you," or words to that effect, which was either a lost bit of storytelling or it was him sensing that this connection went deeper to the dyad. But obviously it gives them such this deep understanding of each other, being a dyad, sort of these two souls connected, and it explains why they understand each other so well.
Definitely. Do you think that we hear Snoke say, darkness rises and light to meet it, but Snoke thought it would be Skywalker, not this girl Rey. Do you think maybe that line in the book could be referencing the fact that not just that this is the dyad and this is a person you're connected with, but also that this is the light coming to meet the dark. He's the dark, Rey's the light, and he knows now that this is who's coming to meet him, and they're now connected that way.
Yeah, quite possibly. And it's that sense of, again, yin and yang, this balance of light and dark. Light always casts a shadow. So Ben and Rey, they complement each other perfectly.
In the going back to the throne room scene when it's when Ben decides to kill Snoke and team up with Rey, and they end up taking on the Snoke's guards. When that scene first happened, my thought went straight to sort of Anakin and Palpatine and how throughout the generations, every Sith pair, you have one to hold the power and one to crave it, and then the Padawan kills the master and becomes the master. Then you get a new Padawan, and then eventually that Padawan kills the master, becomes the master, and then takes a new Padawan. And it's like a toxic cycle, and that's how the Sith do it. I always thought that Anakin, sort of once Padme died and he lost all his friends, Vader's very much a tragically flawed. He's very angry because he's very sad. He does the Empress bidding because there's no other choice. Like, he can't go back. There's no Jedi Order left. He can't. He's very much lost in his decision making where he's like, I've made the decisions now and this is infinite. But never once does he try to sort of, or not yet anyway, it's not been portrayed that way in media, and I don't think it will because I think it's not in his character. So sort of Vader does not want to kill Palpatine to become the Master Sith to then find an apprentice. Obviously, he does tell Luke, join me and we can rule the galaxy's father and son. I don't think that's really. I think he's just saying that to get Luke to come with him to the Emperor. I don't really think he honestly believes that. And here we see, that's probably Vader's Sith flaw is that he's not a full Sith in the fact that he won't kill his master, and he's not scheming to sort of kill him, take over, and then get a new apprentice and be even more evil. Vader's just sort of lost and doing the day-to-day things because there's no other way. Like he's made his decisions. He can't go back and change those things. He's lost his family, he's lost his friends, he's lost everything, and this is the situation he's in now. And he's just really angry. He's really sad, and he'll do what the Emperor tells him because what else is there? Where here we see Ben or Kylo making the decision to kill his master, and I saw this as Ben sort of going one step further than Vader in regards to sort of being a Dark Lord. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's not a direct parallel because obviously Vader was a Sith Lord. He was Darth Vader. Whereas Ben, he isn't a Sith as Kylo. He's just a dark side user. So in a way, he is freed from the shackles of that master-apprentice rule. So when he does kill Snoke, I think he's not necessarily looking at Rey as a apprentice. He literally wants somebody, I think, by his side. And that's why he says we could, I think, change the galaxy together. He wants to be with Rey. And I think he wants to be on level ground with Rey. So with Vader breaking sort of the Sith cycle, because the Sith do die with Vader, well, almost. Ben then is released from that as Kylo, but he does still choose the dark over the light.
Yeah. What's your favorite places to read about Ben in other media? For example, if we've got listeners who are sort of going, "Oh, I really love the movies and I like Kylo Ren, but I haven't really read anything or seen anything else," where do you recommend people going to get their Kylo fix?
Well, there is so much good stuff out there. First place to go is Charles Soule's The Rise of Kylo Ren. It's only a 4-part comic series, so it's nothing huge, and that in detail gives some of the key moments that lead to Ben's fall. From Ben to Ren was the key line of that series. It's absolutely amazing, masterfully drawn by Will Sliney. He captures Adam Driver's performance in a comic, which is just mind-blowing. I'd also recommend the Age of Resistance Kylo Ren by Tom Taylor. That's a really interesting story where we see, I think, a bit of a younger Kylo enforcing the will of the First Order. And he's actually following in Vader's footsteps in this particular battle on a planet in the Outer Rim. What's quite interesting about Age of Resistance is the Kylo in that one. You see a lot of Leia and a lot of Han in him. And I think that does show that even as a dark sider, he still can't get rid of his family ties. There's some great wit in there. He's got Leia's wit and Han's sarcasm, which is really interesting. There's also in the same series, albeit it's called Age of Resistance, General Hux. Hux is put with Kylo, which is pretty common because they do make a really funny pair because they're always arguing. I mean, they hate one another, but they're actually really similar. I think if they realized how similar they were, they might hate each other less. And they're stuck on a planet together, and Kylo gets knocked unconscious in a fight, and Hux has to get them both out of there, which is really interesting. And finally in that series there's also Age of Resistance Snoke, which Snoke takes Kylo to Dagobah, to the cave that Luke was in. And Kylo has to face his fears. And although he cuts Luke down in that, he doesn't cut down Han and Leia.
Very, very. I've not read I've read the Rise of Kylo Ren, which I loved. I haven't read those Rise of the Resistance ones you mentioned there, but the way you've described them, I definitely want to check them out now.
And also a shout out needs to go to the IDW comics as well. Star Wars Adventures number 30, which is another Kylo Ren and General Hux story set in between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And again, the two of them are on a planet having to work together. And Kylo has to go up against an Ackley, a la the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones. And that is, again, really interesting issue. And again, in that one, you see Han. You see a lot of Han in Kylo's words.
Do you think that do you see Kylo Ren as a hero or a villain, or is it more complicated than that, do you think?
I think it is more complicated than that. We're all the heroes of our own stories. And Kylo has done terrible things. I'm not convinced they make him a villain. But at the same time, you can't say he's a hero. What he does for Rey is very heroic and is the true selflessness of a Jedi. But I think Kylo and Ben are both perfect examples of what is just a very morally grey character, which is this humanity that Adam Driver brings to this role of, just like any person, Kylo / Ben, he's not good, he's not bad, he's just a man trying to find his way in the galaxy.
Where do you think we go with the character now? Do you think there's an opportunity for Ben to come back from the dead? It does seem that he didn't become a Force ghost, perhaps. So maybe we can't get him as a Force ghost. But is there a chance that he comes back from the dead, or you think that's the character done now?
The ending of The Rise of Skywalker broke me. I cried for, I think it was an hour and a half afterwards. And I have never seen The Rise of Skywalker once since seeing it in the cinema. The DVD I have is still in its cellophane. I try not to think about that ending. But alas, it happened. I think it is a beautiful moment up until that kiss, and I love that. And then it goes and breaks my heart from there on onwards. I would absolutely adore it if they managed to bring Ben back, because we just don't get to see him as Ben. We just get to see him as Kylo, and that's part of the tragedy of his fall, is we've never seen Ben just being himself. So if Rey could find a way, the worlds between worlds maybe, to bring him back, because through Ben's death we lose the Solos and we lose the true Skywalkers. Even though Rey takes on that name, we do lose that true lineage, and I think that is so tragic. So yes, I would sign every petition and appeal to bring the character back, and a reason to get Adam Driver back in Star Wars, because a lot of the films he makes are very serious, and he brings that gravity to the role.
Would you like to see sort of an adventure series where we see Luke and Kylo going on adventures, sort of very much like the beginning of the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, but more sort of without the sort of looming fate of Ben. So it's more about other places they go without sort of the subplot that Ben's going to turn soon. Maybe let's say a
100%,
couple of years before
100%.
the Rise of Kylo Ren.
100% would love to see that, because it would be great to see a younger Ben interacting with Chewie, interacting with Luke, and maybe Lor San Tekka, because we know he has a history with Lor. Just to see him becoming or trying to become a Jedi, because he is very powerful in the Force. His Force abilities and his lightsaber skills are evident. And Ben's past is something that's really not been explored that much. We get to see a little bit of him in Last Shot when he's a toddler and he's going around calling Lando Uncle Wanwo, and we get to see it a bit in The Rise of Kylo Ren, but again, those are just flashbacks. So yeah, I think an animated series would be brilliant, because then they could get Mark Hamill and Adam Driver to do the voiceovers.
Yeah, I would totally be up for that. Obviously, speaking of Ben and Kylo's saber skills, I know like after the Force Awakens, there was a bit of sort of conversation about how he was defeated by Rey and how sort of it didn't look good. But I always thought, as he takes that, they spend the whole movie in the Force Awakens building up the power and just how powerful Chewbacca's bowcaster is, like on purpose. And then obviously when we see, after Kylo makes the decision to kill Han, Chewbacca shoots someone and sort of, just below the stomach or in the stomach almost with the bowcaster. And Ben's very much fighting Rey with the, I always class it as like he's probably dying until he gets medical attention. So he's a mortally wounded Ben Solo, Kylo Ren when he's fighting Rey. And he still puts up a really good fight. Was what I thought. I don't know what you thought about that, an actual taking the bowcaster and then having 2 lightsaber battles after that. But I think it shows just how tough he is.
Yeah, I mean, first thought, that's got to damn hurt being shot with a bowcaster. So anybody who thinks that it's a surprise that Kylo is defeated by Rey, the guy is sporting about 5 different wounds by the time Rey actually does, defeat him. He's been shot. Rey gets him on the arm, I think twice, and yeah, he's had to go through these 2 lightsaber fights. One with Finn, which is pretty quick because obviously Finn doesn't know what he's doing with that saber. But that is just another representation of his sheer strength, because he must be in absolute agony. He's still standing, he's still fighting, and he doesn't make it easy for Rey. It's not an easy fight. It's not like 2 slashes, it's over. It's a very physical fight. They're having to fight the landscape as well. And when Rey does finally land that blow to his face to bring him down, I think he must have been, I mean, he was literally on probably his last legs, those last bits of energy even that the dark side can give. So I think his strength is the fact that he managed to fight Rey, not the fact that he lost to Rey.
Yeah, I think there's a moment in that battle where even like he punches the wound where Chewbacca shot him a couple of times, and I think it's to generate more pain, to generate more anger, to then be able to fight longer. So yeah, I always saw it as like, the guy's on his last legs. Yeah, he's took such a beating. The emotional toll as well of like killing his dad will still be on him. So yeah, I always saw it as sort of Rey is probably lucky that Ben was in the state he was in when she fought him that first time, rather than Ben just being weak, if that makes sense, without being mortally wounded or emotionally wounded.
Definitely makes sense. I
Do you
don't
have
think
a
Rey would have won that fight if Kylo had been at full strength.
definitely? What sort of Kylo Ren Ben Solo merchandise do you own? I always love this question with anybody I speak to because I love collecting.
Oh my gosh, well, it's a bit of a running joke with me. I have over 50 different Kylo Ren figures. The smallest probably being my Lego Brickheads, the biggest being my Hot Toys Last Jedi version of Kylo Ren. And then I've got about every different Hasbro one going. And some of the personal favourites of mine are some of the rarer Kylo Ren Funko variants.
So you're all in on that Kylo Ren merch train.
100%. My Labrador, my black Labrador, is actually called Kylo. So I think he's a pretty unique bit of merchandise.
That is a one of one. Yep, very rare.
There's also the
Do you
really fun Build-A-Bear, did a Kylo Ren bear. So I have that.
have a lightsaber?
Yes, I do have a Kylo Ren lightsaber. I have the Disney Store version, which makes all the noises. And I also have a Kylo Ren cosplay. I did cosplay for the Friday Midnight Madness just before The Last Jedi.
And in that cosplay, do you wear a helmet or are you helmetless?
I don't have the helmet. That's the one thing I really wish I had. But the Black Series, Hasbro Black Series did one, and it's so difficult to find them now.
Yeah, I sort of remember the original helmet being out there, and obviously that's been out since 2015, so they're all sold really. I don't remember seeing the Rise of Skywalker one with the red welds. I don't remember seeing that anywhere, so I don't even know if they made that. I mean, I know the merchandise of Rise of Skywalker has been pretty poor in my opinion. We haven't had a Jedi Knight Ben Solo yet, which is like crazy. Like considering you just need to put him in a jumper with a blue lightsaber. That's all you need to do, and we'll buy it. But not available as of yet. So hopefully, maybe down the line we'll get that helmet released, and maybe down the line we'll get more Ben figures like that. I think the Ben Pop Funkos just come out this month. Like the good side Ben, is that right?
It has. I've got it on my
You
shelf
bought it yet?
already. Which looks brilliant. It's got the jumper and everything, but I was a bit mad because Funko have included the scar on his face, but by the time he's Ben again, Rey has healed that scar.
Yeah, that's right. When he comes back, obviously the scar's not there. which again, I find that is very sort of a moving and very subtle nod to sort of, the fact he made the decision to make the good decision is sort of healed him of his past decisions, if that makes sense. And then obviously you see that actual scar go, which is the scar that reminds him of his dad. That's where his dad touched him before his dad died. So again, another very subtle but emotional piece of storytelling there. Have you got any sort of final thoughts on Ben Solo Kylo Ren that we haven't covered?
I think I could probably go on speaking about all the parallels and what Ben and Kylo sort of represent for quite a while, but Ben will always just be my favorite Star Wars character because I think he portrays that conflict we all feel of. One of his key lines is, "I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it." And I think we've all felt that at some point. We've all been at a crossroads where we don't know if we have the strength to do something. And finding that strength takes courage. And finding that strength takes sacrifice. So Ben for me represents that, always understanding that no choice is ever easy. No choice is necessarily the right choice. It's the choice of that moment, of that time. And we are more than the sum of our actions. We will be conflicted about our choices, but at the end of the day, we have the power over our choices, and Ben's final choice is the choice of the light. So I think that's what Ben represents for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the way you put that was beautiful, and also it reminds me of Luke Skywalker, in the way he sort of, Luke Skywalker after the events of Return of the Jedi, we see one of his key beliefs is that you can always make whatever decision you've made. I might have done a bad thing today, but tomorrow I might get the opportunity to do a good thing. And just because I've done a bad thing yesterday doesn't mean I can't do a good thing today. And there's always that choice of change. I think it's in the video game Battlefront 2 when Luke comes across, I can't remember his name, one of the Imperial characters in the game, and Luke makes a choice he saves him, and then they have a conversation, and this guy's like, why do you think I let you take, like, Luke's essentially looking for a Jedi compass, which you do actually see in his hut in The Last Jedi, and he goes, why would I let you take that? And Luke goes, because I asked. And he goes, okay. And he goes, there's other choices, because this Imperial goes, I know what the Empire does do in some places. I'm not blind. Luke goes, there's other choices. And the guy goes, the rebellion. And Luke goes, no, but just an opportunity to be better. Other choices. You can be better every day if you choose to be. And that's always my favourite teaching of Luke Skywalker. And then obviously, we see Kylo Ren, Ben Solo sort of acting upon and doing that same teaching, even though for so much of the story we see this guy who hates Luke Skywalker and like hates that, but we actually see sort of living the same philosophy, which I find like really, really beautiful. Is that you can make a different decision, and he ends up doing that and doing the right thing and the really, really brave thing, and also the selfless thing. We talk about the Jedi Order, and the Jedi in the prequels are very much the blinded, they're not what they once were, they're too caught up in stuff, and that's very much by design of Palpatine, I think, for them to get caught up in that type of stuff and to sort of, it's their own downfall. But being selfless is the true value of a Jedi. Qui-Gon Jinn was the most selfless of the Jedi. Kanan Jarrus, selfless of the Jedi. The things he does in Rebels, sacrifices himself to save his friends. And then obviously we see here, Ben is selfless and sacrifices himself to bring Rey back. It's the most selfless act you can do is to give your life for something else. And to me, again, that puts him in that decision right there would make him up there with top tier Jedi, in my opinion, with Kanan Jarrus, with Qui-Gon Jinn, amongst others. It's just a shame that, you think about the tragedy of it. They say Star Wars is tragedy, but all three of those characters do die.
Don't fall in love in
Very
Star
gruesome
Wars.
deaths, I
It's a
suppose.
trap.
Yeah, definitely. So, quickly sum up for us, sort of, why is Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, Purely BELTA? Just a quick
He's
couple
purely
of sentences
Belter
on that.
because he's purely Belter because he is just this human character who doesn't always make the best choices, and I think that's so relatable. We don't always make the best choices. We just make the choices that are available to us at that time.
He also has the best hair and the biggest chest.
That too. I think, yeah, that definitely has that going for him, which is probably another reason why you can't not like him, because he's really just too handsome not to like.
Yeah. I also love it, like, in his lightsaber design, it's so different. It's like, not so, it's like subtly, obviously, in the prequels, we get the double ended lightsaber, and that's like, oh wow, like the double ended one, never seen this before. And then, like, here we see sort of the cross guard, so it's like subtly different and it's unstable, but like it really does define sort of what Ben and Kylo is. He's an unstable guy. His lightsaber's unstable. He's a little bit different to the baddies we've seen before because he's not 100% a baddie. So he has a lightsaber that's a little bit different from the ones from the past. It's got the cross guard on. So yeah, I think for me, I love his whole design, the way he looks, the way the robes have given the helmet, how they use the helmet, the lightsaber, how they use the lightsaber. For me, I really bought into him being lost and unsure and being sort of between paths of the light and dark. I really bought into that, and it's sort of the emotion. It really pulled me in to him as a character. Yeah, he is just an absolute, like, again, a fantastic character, and it was great to sort of, the sequel trilogy is very much Ben and Rey's story, in my opinion. I know we talk of trios in Star Wars. We have a trio. We have the original trilogy trio of Luke, Leia, Han. We have the prequel trilogy trio of Padme, Anakin, Obi-Wan. When these movies were coming out, the new trilogy, it was like the trio is Finn, Rey, and Poe. But I think it's different now. I think it is a case of it's, Rey and Ben, Rey and Kylo are sort of the center points, and it's the dyad again, like, is the story, if that makes sense. Would you agree with that?
It is. Their struggles are the heart of the sequel trilogy. That dyad, and as I sort of previously mentioned, it is a love story between them, and unfortunately, it is very tragic. But like you said, it's that conflict, because even Rey is conflicted between the light and dark, and it's their struggles with their inner conflicts that define the sequel trilogy.
Would you class yourself as a Reylo?
100%. I have another Labrador called Ray, so that I can have two Labradors and call them Raylo.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I love that. Anything else to add about Kylo Ren and why he is purely Belter?
I think, yeah, I mean, he's just purely Belter because there's this conflict within him. He's not a true villain. He's just morally grey. And due to being on neither the light side nor the dark side, he's just ruled by the conflict and the choices he makes. So he's one of the, I think, most relatable characters in Star Wars. I think anybody who watches the sequel trilogy will see some part of themselves in Kylo at some point.
Definitely. I think anybody who's human and anybody who's sort of been through struggles, which we all do, I think can definitely see themselves in Ben, in Kylo. I think that's one of the reasons why everyone's drawn to him so much. Kat, thank you very much for coming on the Star Wars show and for letting us know what you think is Purely BELTA. Where can the people find you on social media?
It's been a pleasure and honour talking about my favourite character. You can find me at Kat Kylo on Twitter, and I'm always happy to talk anything Star Wars or Ben Solo, Kylo Ren.
And you also review comics for Jedi News. Where can people check those out?
Yes, if you want to read my reviews, then please hop along to JediNews.com, where we provide all the latest news in the Star Wars galaxy, along with reviews, podcasts, and other exclusive features.
Fantastic. And so, what's just before we go? What's been some of the best Star Wars comics you've been reading lately?
Oh, definitely the current Darth Vader series, Darth Vader 2020. That's by Greg Pak. That's currently amazing, as we actually get to see some of the connections to Episode 9, Exegol, and Ochi of Bestoon. So if you want to know a bit more about the history there with Palpatine, and that, definitely one to check out. And War of the Bounty Hunters for all the Bounty Hunter scum, as we see Boba Fett trying to get Han back, and you have all these massive heavy hitters in the bounty hunting world. IG-88, Bosk, Zuckuss. That is just incredible crossover.
I've been reading the Vader comic. I'm loving it, but I read it in trade paperback, so I'm like a volume behind. So the Exegol stuff hasn't come for me yet, but I think the comic is actually at my comic dealer. So I just need to pick it up, and I can't wait to dive into Exegol. Just a quick one from me. Obviously, we've been talking about Kylo Ren, and he's very much he's torn between the light and the dark. And speaking of the dark side, I listened to an episode by the Sky Talkers podcast. Who anybody who loves Star Wars should definitely check out Sky Talkers. In my opinion, the best Star Wars podcast out there. They really do, they deep dive into things with a lot of detail, a lot of thought, and they break things down really simply as well. And it's a pleasure to listen to. So they did this dark side episode, sort of focusing on the dark side of the Force. It's the episode from the 3rd of June, if you're looking for it on their feed. But obviously they do dive into Kylo Ren and how Kylo and how Ben is a little bit different from the dark siders of the past and that we're used to in Star Wars. So although he's not the main focus of the episode, it's a great episode about the dark side. And then they do talk about Kylo and the dark side within that episode as well. And those guys love Reylo as well, so they dive into it with a very positive look on the character. So definitely anybody looking to sort of deep dive more into Kylo and deep dive more into the dark side of the Force, check out that episode. But yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, Kat. Hopefully we'll have you back on in the future to talk about some other awesome Star Wars things. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great talking about Kylo, as my teammates at Jedi News don't let me sneak him onto our podcasts. And I would love to come back in the future to talk anything Star Wars.
Like, you can even come back on and talk about more Kylo Ren if you want. If they're not going to let you do it over there, come over here and we can chat about Kylo Ren as long as you want.
That is a plan, deal. That's a better deal than one Han Solo could give me. I will take that.
That's because I went on a bridge with Han and he didn't come back. Only I did. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club. Please follow us on Twitter at BoresStar. That's at BoresStar. and on Instagram and Facebook at Star Wars Podcast. You can also reach us on email at starwarspodcast@gmail.com. The Star Wars Show can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and wherever podcasts can be found. Please give us a like, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a 5-star review. May the Force be with you.